ധീംതാന ധീംതാന ധിരനാന ധീന ധീംതാന ധീംതാന ധിരനാന ധീന ധീംതാന ധീംതാന ധിരനാന ധീന ധീംതാന ധീംതാന ധിരനന ധിര ധിരന.
Friends, good morning to all of you. I have great pleasure in welcoming and inviting Dr. Padmanabhan to preside over this session. Professor Padmanabhan is the head of the Department of Sanskrit and is a very well-known scholar in Sri Vaishnavism, Vishishtadvaita, and more than this, rich in traditionally rich, like culture rich, and rich in its own heritage and tradition. And Dr. Padmanabhan will be chairing this session. I have great pleasure in welcoming again Dr. Padmanabhan and over to him to conduct these proceedings of this session.
तस्मै नमो रामानुजार्याय परमयोगिने यः श्रुतिस्मृतिसूत्राणाम् अन्तर्ज्वरम् अशीशमत्. Good morning, everybody. Respected Professor Dr. Mishra, scholars and friends, as per the request or rather command, I would say, of Dr. Mishra, the session I have to chair has been advanced, and I am chairing the session as a proxy in place of Shri V.S. Karunakar Acharya. Yeah, of course. Anyway, I do not know whether it is a good luck or a bad luck to preside over this session. To conduct a seminar or conference of this nature in the millennium of year of Sri Ramanuja, I think we are trying to understand rather than propagate the philosophy of Sri Ramanujacharya. To be frank, I am born in the tradition and being brought up in the tradition. Still, I feel there are areas, gray areas, still to be explored and understand. In this regard, this conference assumes a great importance. I really feel that we can concur with each other and share our thoughts so that we can have a better understanding of the philosophy of Ramanuja, more so the Indian philosophical traditions. In my personal view, any Indian system of philosophy based on the canonical text, the Prasthanatraya, each system is interrelated to the other tradition. Without understanding the other tradition, one may not be able to understand and appreciate the philosophy of his choice. If you want to understand Advaita better, And clearly, we will have to read the Shri Bhashya, particularly the Lagupurva Paksha and Mahapurva Paksha. As my professor Dr. Veernathan used to say this, nobody has presented Advaita so clearly as Ramanuja has presented. And if you want to understand Dvaita clearly, we have to read the Advaita Siddhi. So therefore, each and every system of thought is interrelated to each other. Therefore, by inviting such scholars from all over the world, I am sure we will be in a position to understand the system of Ramanuja better than before. Thanks to Dr. Mishra, he gave me this opportunity to be the chairperson of the session rather than to present a paper itself. Had he requested me like that, I am sure I would not have done that. And I am so happy to listen the speakers and later convey my thoughts over that. Regarding the speakers, we have with us today Dr. Sucharita Adulari, who is an associate professor in the Department of Philosophy and Comparative Religion at Cleveland State University. And I know her for the last so many years because she used to come here to Chennai and read with me some of the texts of Sri Ramanuja. She's a studious student of this tradition, and she had presented so many good papers. A recent book is that Textual Authority in Classical Indian Thought, Ramanuja and the Vishnu Purana is the recent text that had been published by her. And she will be speaking on the concept of bhakti in the Bhagavad Gita. I think we have two more speakers. Professor Chakravarti Ramprasad from Lancaster University, and he is a professor of comparative religion and philosophy. And I have heard him by name, and this is the first time I am going to listen to his lecture. I am looking forward to his lecture, and I hope that would be an interesting paper. Regarding other two speakers is one Professor Devanathan. He is not coming. Okay. So, other person is my one colleague, Dr. Narasimhan, who has specialized in darshanas and also in Ramanuja's philosophy. I am sure it would be an interesting paper, and let us eagerly wait for the presentation of the speakers. Now I request Professor Ram Prasad to present his paper. Over to Ram Prasad.
If we follow the consensus that's perhaps emerged since Van Buitenen's work, the Vedanta Samgraha was probably the first work of Ramanuja's. And in the very last section, he tackles the question of bhakti from a Vedantic perspective, and therefore perhaps his first articulation of this idea. Now, we are all aware of the tension that has to be resolved in all Vedantic systems, but perhaps Ramanuja was the first to tackle it in this distinctive way as an alternative to how Shankara had had dealt with it. And the basic problem can be put in a deceptively simple manner. On the one hand, if you are committed as a Vedantin to exploring the metaphysics of being, what there is, in terms of the Upanishadic idea of some kind of profound relationship of identity between the Atman as the self who is undertaking this inquiry and Brahman, which is the absolute principle, explanatory principle, however it is to be understood, then as a Vedantin, you are constantly having to negotiate the question of the unitive nature of the existence of the individual undertaking inquiry. On the other hand, as a bhakta, you are operating in the world of difference. That is to say, you need an other in order for love to not be mere self-love. So the question then becomes, how do you relate what seems to require non-duality with what does require difference? And is that a duality, and does that then represent an irreconcilable tension? Now we know, of course, that in his radical manner, Shankara subordinated in a variety of ways the all necessity for dualist discourse. And he did so in regard to bhakti in a variety of interesting ways, which I won't go into, perhaps most interestingly in the Gita Bhashya, about which I've written a few years ago. But in sum, he is able to reduce, because he is committed to reducing any account of difference to the status of the less than real, the world of bhakti, the activities that come with it, the emotional content, are all generated as a preliminary to the attainment of the non-dual relationship, which is always Shankara's ultimate aim. And he can do so through the revision, what I have called in the past a revisionary metaphysics. That is, he revises, he says that the way in which our experiences function now, including the experience of bhakti, has necessarily to be radically given up at the ultimate point of the establishment of the Vedantic unity. Now, the most appealing contrast, and the most perhaps dominant contrast that has been given by way of reading Ramanuja, is to say that he reverses the sequence, that in some sense he places unity at the disposal of the difference implied in the emotional relationship of bhakti between the individual and the divine. What I'm going to try and do today is, first of all, just take you with relatively little comment through the sequence of ideas he explores in the concluding section of the Vedanta Sangraha, where he makes a set of intricate moves, and we just don't have the time to consider each of them in detail, although they each play a role in the overall claim that he's going to make. But just having taken you through that, I want to raise the question of exactly what Ramanuja says is this relationship between the requirement of unity implied by the metaphysics of Atman Brahman and the implication of difference, the love of the other, that is required to make bhakti sensible. And I want to suggest that it is not a simple reversal of value, that is to say, the reversal of the relative importance that Shankara had suggested, that Ramanuja is doing something slightly different, but that in doing so, he raises interesting questions of a more general philosophical nature that perhaps have not been investigated as deeply as they might be. So let me just, therefore, take a little bit of time in taking you very quickly through the set of moves before I then step back and have some comments on it. Sorry, there have been some confusion about the exact document that's been used for the PowerPoint, and I think I have a slightly earlier version, so my apologies if there are some transcriptional mistakes either in the Sanskrit or in the English. My apologies for that. I just noticed that I've given it. But anyway, so by the time he arrives at this concluding passage, it is from in Buchanan's, Van Buchanan's edition, the sections 141, 42, 43, and 44. Ramanuja is now ready to tackle the question of bhakti, which he does so interestingly here in terms of an associative linkage between devotion, which is my standard translation for bhakti, priti, which in the rather tone-deaf language of English becomes love, and from there to sukha, which again I've deliberately left in a very open way as happiness, choosing to use the standard translation of bliss for ananda. So this sequence of devotion is love, and love has to have an intrinsic relationship with happiness, is the set of linkages that Ramanuja starts with. So his most important point here is that the term devotion has a sense of what I've translated as distinguishing love. And that love is of a distinguishing awareness, which is my translation of jnana vishesha. So Ramanuja wants to say, and this is upfront his important move, that the relationship between the emotion of love and of jnana, which sometimes I translate as awareness, sometimes as cognition, not necessarily knowledge, that connection